Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. The day before, on Wednesday, we had an exciting and enriching conversation with Sir Martin Sorrell, Chairman of S4 Capital and ex-CEO of WPP. He spoke to us about how advertising and marketing services are going to be transformed by the digital acceleration this COVID situation has brought about across all businesses. Earlier in the week, we also had Professor Lakshmi Narayanan speaking to us about how unlocking of the economy is unfolding and what we need to do to stay safe and conduct our business. If you're interested, find those recordings on our social pages, along with many other sessions that we've held in the past. Coming to today's session, this one is for those who want to follow their dreams and passions and create a unique life for themselves. We have amongst us Mr. Arjun Malhotra, who is going to walk us through his life's journey and share with us lessons he picked up on his way from being a corporate hotshot to an accomplished entrepreneur. But before I introduce Mr. Malhotra to all our audience today, quick housekeeping checks. I hope all of you are staying safe, your families are safe. If yes, please give us a big thumbs up by clicking on the like button. Do let us know which city, which country you are joining us from today. Our speaker and all of us would be interested to know where you have joined us today from. Now, to ask your questions, share any comments, please make sure as the session is progressing, post your questions on the comment section. I'm going to pick up your questions and post it to Mr. Malhotra at the end of his session. And remember, 2 lucky questions will be picked up at the end of the session, and those will be declared as lucky winners for today's session. So stay with us till the end of the session. Keep asking your questions, and I'm going to post that to Mr. Malhotra. Now, coming to Mr. Malhotra's introduction, Mr. Arjun Malhotra is a pioneer of the Indian IT industry. He served as the chairman of Headstrong's board of directors before its acquisition by Genpact in May 2011. Now, he's had a long string of entrepreneurial success. He co-founded the HCL Group in 1975, taking it from a 6-person garage operation to one of India's largest information technology corporation. The first leading Indian entrepreneur to relocate to USA, Mr. Malhotra took over HCL's US operations, now known as HCL Technologies, in 1989 and grew it to nearly $100 million annual revenues. He's on the board of governors of ISB Hyderabad and IIT Kharagpur Foundation. He was also awarded the Albert Einstein Technology Medal for 2001. For his contribution to the Indian IT industry, he got the DQ Lifetime Achievement Award. It is an honor to have you with us today, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on Master Speak, and all of us are waiting to hear from you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rakesh. Thank you for that very kind introduction, and welcome everyone. I was asked to share my life story. Now, as you can see from my gray hair, my life in the IT industry started a long time ago. I graduated from IIT Kharagpur in electronics and electrical communication engineering in 1970. Unlike a lot of my batchmates and classmates, I decided to stay back in India and took a job with DCM as a senior management trainee. You know, what happened a year after I finished, in a year I finished my training, and they decided to get into electronics. And I was one of the few people in the company at that time. DCM, again, Delhi Cloth and General Mills Company Limited, was a big conglomerate. It was the 4th largest company in the country, private sector company in the country by revenue. And they were in, of course, textiles, rayon tire cord, fertilizers, chemicals, Rath Vanaspati, they were a whole slew. They were a conglomerate. And they decided to get into electronics. And I was called in by the big boss. And 1 year out of college, I was told that you're either going to head production and R&D, or you're going to head sales and marketing, depending on who we can get in the market. They found someone from ITI Bangalore to take care of the technical side. And so I ended up looking at the field operations, the maintenance, and sales and marketing. And so it was really, baptism by fire in a way. I had no idea. I was an engineer, 1 year training, and I was thrown into the field to look after a product that was the blue-eyed baby for the executive director at that time. We did a very good job at DCM. We built a good R&D. We actually differentiated our product substantially. We got some very good feedback from the market, and we had some 80% market share in calculators. That honeymoon lasted for 5 years. India was a socialist country, and we had an act called the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act, which really meant that no large company could get into anything new. It was all reserved for public sector, state sector, government-oriented companies. In the meanwhile, at HCL, through the R&D, we had developed, at DCM, through the R&D, we had already developed a computer using bit slice technology, and microprocessors were just coming out, and we wanted to make a 4-bit microprocessor-based programmable calculator, which we did in DCM. Unfortunately, their legal department told them that they would run foul of the Monopolies and Restricted Trade Practices Act if they got into computers or microcomputers or mini computers or anything of that definition. I was 25, 26 years old. You see this whole market before you. You see this new technology, microprocessors, that we thought, or at least I thought, was going to change the world. And suddenly the company you're in doesn't want to get into that business. So 6 of us from the company decided that we'd leave and do it on our own. Now, this was complete bravado. We knew the market, we knew the technology. We had no money, we had no business plan, but we felt that the microprocessors changing the world, the passion that we had was really what got us through. So we pulled our money together. I think at that time it was 1,75,000 rupees. That's 175,000 rupees, which translated at that time to $17,500. Took a Versati, not really a garage, in my grandmother's house in Golf Links, which she kindly gave us free, and started the company from there. Again, stroke of luck. If we had to manufacture calculators, I don't know how we would have done it, but there was a TV company called Televista, and Ved Luthra, who was the managing director of Televista, he was making calculators, but he was having difficulty selling them. So he came to us with a very interesting proposition. He said, sell calculators under my brand. I will give you my cost, bill of materials, and cost of production. You give me your estimated sales and marketing costs, and there's obviously a profit in the middle. So what we'll do is, we will make a hundi, that means a kind of a letter of credit of sorts, that you pay after 90 days at half the profit included in the cost to them. And at the end of 90 days, we look at our books, and if you spent less or I've spent more or less, we'll adjust the profit accordingly and put it in the next hundi. And so basically, we got a 90-day line of credit. We got calculators in hand, and we started the company on the company was called Microcomp Limited. It was started on 15th of October 1975. We were cash positive on 1st of November because we collected money which we had to pay only 90 days later. And so that's how the company started. The dream was, of course, to get into computers. And by December, we had made enough money, we thought, to invest in R&D to make our own computer. We then pulled some more technical people into the company from DCM itself and from a company called Alpha Electro, where some of the DCM engineers had gone. And we developed our own, initially 4-bit programmable desktop calculator, which we called a microcomputer at that time. And then subsequently an 8-bit commercial machine. The 4-bit machines used the Rockwell PPS4 chip. The 8-bit machine, initially the 8C as we called it, the HCL 8C, used the Rockwell PPS8 chip. And we built some very exciting technology on our 8-bit machine. Power failures used to be the norm, let's say, in India at that time. Now, trying to run a computer when power goes on and off regularly becomes a real issue, especially when you don't have too many good programmers around. And that was one of the big problems we had. So when we designed the computer, we built something called a power shutoff auto restart. So basically, we used a truck battery and we connected it to the computer with some technology, basically, that actually, when the power failed, it held all the computer registers to where it had stopped. And when the power came back, it started from exactly the point where it stopped. At maximum, you got one line of junk on your printer. But other than that, the computer didn't have to be reset or whatever to continue the work. And that was a huge, huge advantage for us because none of the overseas machines had it. You had to buy really expensive UPS systems to actually have them stay alive when the power went off. And so the HCL 8C became a big hit. In fact, again, let me put this right. Sometimes you have to go, luck's on your side in a way, or the fate smile on you, whatever word you want to use. Because the day we took out a full page ad for the HCL 8C in 1977, the headlines in the newspaper were that IBM and Coca-Cola were going to quit India. So in a lot of people's minds, we replaced IBM, which was a good thing. Excuse me. A little more background. By the time we were ready to make our computer, the government had restricted all the licenses to state and public sector. So we couldn't get a license to make it. We had to sign a joint sector agreement with the UP Electronics Corporation, basically Uptron, and we were the first joint sector with them, which is why we got the name Hindustan Computers Limited, or we were able to get it. All the other Uptron ventures were Uptron something or the other, and I'm sure some of you have heard of them. But that's the way we got our computer license. We also had to, because it was a UP-based company, we had to set up a manufacturing unit in UP, but all our people were in Delhi. We were all in Delhi. Fortunately, Noida had just come up. And so HCL, even today, Noida is its headquarters, and that's where we set it up initially. So the thing in HCL was we never looked back. We had lots of problems, and I can describe some of them to you. I don't know how relevant they are in today's world because the license raj has gone. Things are much, much easier, different now. Easier is the wrong word. Give you some examples of, one example of what happened was, the way we worked in those days was we took a 30% advance when you gave us an order. That 30% actually covered a bill of material for the HCL 8C for the computer. And basically, once it was ready, you came to the factory, had a look at the machine, gave me a check for the balance 70%, and then we shipped it to you and installed it at your premises. So our first machine was ready. It was sold to a company in Delhi called Remfree and Son. Jyoti Sagar was the gentleman there. He still runs a legal setup that looks IP, and they were very big in trademarks and IP in those days. He came to the factory, looked at it, gave us the 70% check, and we were packing the machine to ship it. When someone, I forget who, someone in the factory came and asked us, "Have you paid your excise?" And we said, "What is this excise?" So we were told that, anytime you produce something in India, there's a manufacturing tax you've got to pay. It's called excise. And so we called the excise inspector and asked him, "Tell me, how much excise do I have to pay?" There were certain things which you paid ad valorem, which is a percentage of the sale price of the equipment. There were certain things like transformers where you paid 4 annas per kilogram by weight of the transformer. So we asked him how much and how do you want us to pay the excise? So he looked through the entire excise manual and he couldn't see anything that said microcomputer, mini computer, microprocessor based. There was no such classification. So he said, "Look, I can't tell you what to pay, but I can tell you what to do. What you do is write a letter to your administrative ministry. They will then write a letter to the finance ministry, who will then give the notification, which is how you'll pay your excise. So we looked at him and said, "You crazy, writing to two ministries, then they're sending a letter on, that's going to take 4 months. I have to deliver this machine to my customer in the next week." So he said, "No, no, don't worry. This is revenue generating for the government. The finance ministry will give it in one day." So what we did was we called up the Department of Electronics. It had just been formed because electronics was seen as the future of India. And I still remember it was the Saturday, and we used to work half day. I think first and third Saturdays were off. We worked half days, and so did the ministry the other Saturdays. And it was one of those Saturdays we went down and gave them a presentation, and they all looked at it, and we said, "Please write to the Ministry of Finance." We were told that the microprocessor policy has still not been decided. We expect it to take 4 years. So please come back 4 years later, and then we'll look at it and then accordingly write to the Ministry of Finance, which was quite a shock because here we had the machine ready, we had customers, we had a whole organization, we had recruited people. It was a real shock. So much depressed, all of us went back from the meeting. Everyone decided to take a copy of the excise manual, go home and have a look at it in detail and see if we could come up with some kind of solution. Now, India in those days was very keen to do import substitution. So anything that was imported automatically got an entry in the excise manual because they'd be very happy if someone made something in India. So there was a electromechanical accounting invoicing machine that we used to import from East Germany called Robotron. And that, there was a picture of this Robotron machine in the excise book. It had a keyboard, it had a printer, and it had a small display, And so we went to the excise guy on Monday and showed it to him and showed him our machine, which had a keyboard, a printer, and a one-line display. And he said, "Yeah, it looks the same." So we cleared our computers for 4 years as accounting invoicing machines. We even sold one to the Department of Electronics. And the microprocessor policy did take 4 years to come out. So, those were the kind of environments we were working in. I think the lesson from that was I don't think we ever thought anything was impossible. You never, obviously you weren't going to do anything illegal, but other than that, you didn't see anything as being impossible. And of course, we had our dream. Our dream was we wanted to own a fertilizer plant, and that didn't mean a physical fertilizer plant. But DCM's most profitable venture was the fertilizer plant in Kota. And in those days, the turnover there was about 100 crores. So basically, you were saying, "I want to be a 100 crore company." And that was the dream we all started on. And, I won't go ahead and tell you more about the DCM story. All of you are aware. You know the company, you know what it's done, you know what it's doing, you know how big it's grown. But yeah, those were the pioneering days when DCM started. Probably the, how should I put it? The most interesting, the happiest part of my life was when we went through that. We went through a whole lot of changes. Every year we used to get a new budget. It was like redoing your business plan, your marketing plan every year because things would change. Duties would go down to 25% on DRAMs. They would go up to 140% the next year. They would come down again. Everything changed every year. It was a different way of doing business and surviving in India. That has fortunately changed. We have a little more rationalization now. You can make 4 or 5 year plans. I've also got to mention that when we started, I didn't even know what I had never heard of the word entrepreneur. There were businessmen, and between people who were middle class and working and businessmen, the difference was they could go to 5-star hotels. They had an account, an expense account. They probably didn't pay, in my view, they didn't pay their taxes. Taxes were up at 70%. And in one particular year, I remember the tax was 104%. So it was a different world, as I said. And everyone wanted to be in business because you could make money and you could live a better quality of life. In HCL, because there were 6 of us and we were going around the country, we decided that we wanted to be completely transparent, and we wanted to make sure that people don't, there's no black money involved in the whole operation. We just wanted to keep it completely professional. And it's very easy to do that and say that when there's no money around, you may not making any money. What happened was some years later, when we started making money and everyone wanted to improve their quality of life, we looked at the company and realized that one reason why we were getting the quality of people we were able to recruit and retain was because they all liked working in a professional organization where we were completely transparent. And we all felt that, hey, trying to kill the golden goose or the goose that's laying the golden egg is not a good idea. So we all decided that we'd work like any other executive, take a salary like anyone else. And yes, we had our stock. And when it becomes valuable, we'll make our wealth. Got to tell you, it took 20 years before it became valuable. I'll give you another small anecdote. When we were 10 years old, we were the largest computer company in India. We had over 2,000 employees. We were in a whole, I think, we had offices all over the country. I don't remember the number now. But we decided to have a celebration get together at Udaipur. And so we all at Udaipur had a few drinks. We were talking about what we've done in the last 10 years. And remember, we started with 1,75,000 rupees. That's 175,000 rupees, out of which 125,000 rupees went to buy an office in Cuff Parade in Bombay, because you had to be in Bombay. 60% of India's taxes were paid from Bombay at that time. And you had to be in Bombay if you were going to sell computers. And you couldn't rent an office in Bombay. We had to buy one. So really the working capital in the company was 50,000 rupees. And I remember discussing this, that 10 years later, when we were the largest computer company in the country, the fact that the 125,000 rupees we had invested in our Bombay office had given us a better return than the 50,000 rupees we had invested in the company as working capital. That, of course, changed over time, as you probably are aware. But that was, again, India in those days. Now, a lot has changed since then. And I'll just talk a little bit more about my story, and then I'd really love to answer questions from anyone. I decided my reason for leaving a comfortable, secure job, I come from a middle-class family. My dad was in the army. My mother was a medical doctor, but a teaching medical doctor. We had, family of scientists. No one had actually done any business in the family. And so when I did it, it was kind of a shock for everyone. And everyone, my parents were very nice. They didn't say anything, but my uncles and aunts were very clear that you must be crazy trying to leave a big company like DCM where you say you're doing well, secure job, getting paid well. Why do you want to do this? And I had to get them off my back. So I told them, we're going to leverage microprocessors, change the world. And when you say change the world in those days, everyone thought you were high on pot. And so they sort of left you alone. Of course, 2-3 years later, when the company did well, they all took credit for saying, yeah, we told you to do it. But, that's the way families are, I guess, even today. But what happened with me was my motivation was that I wanted the economic freedom to do what I wanted to do. Now, at 25, 26, I hadn't quite decided. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I thought at some stage in life, I will know what I want to do. And at that time, I want to have the money and the economic freedom to do that. So let's say 23 years later in HCL, I'm getting to be close to 50 years old, and the internet comes along. And the internet's, and very interesting transition, going to change the way lots of things are done. And it has, as you're aware now. So way back in 98, 99, I wanted to fool around on the internet at the technology level as it sort of became a standard. HCL's strategy, and HCL was a public company by then, was, and I agree with their strategy, was that why do we have to do that? Let's watch the trend, and when we see where it's going, then let's invest in it and follow it. Why do we have to go fooling around with technologies as they're emerging and dying? And to me, that wasn't exciting. And if HCL had not been a public company, I probably still would have been there. but I thought it wasn't fair that I do what I want to do with money that is public money that the company had. So I decided to leave and fool around on the internet. Did that in '99. Well, I did in '98, sorry, and I started working from home. That didn't work too well. I got thrown out of the house in 10 days. My wife was very clear that, look, this house has run without you for 27 years. You're now saying, why is this here? Why is that happening? So she said, I'll pay for a business center, go work from a business center. And so I ended up meeting some people who'd worked for me there, and we ended up deciding to start another company, uh, which was called TechSpan. We got funding from Goldman Sachs, Walden, and a number of private people who funded it. And we decided to start a different kind of IT services company. We wanted to do consulting, not just doing coding, but actually do consulting rather than just coding. And we felt that we wanted to talk to the business guys, not the IT guys, and use technology as, be agnostic to technology, use it to give solutions, but work with the business guys to find the solution. So that's what we did. Unfortunately, our reputation didn't quite allow us to um, find the right kind of people. We weren't an Accenture. So I couldn't find the consulting level of people that I needed in the US to be able to do that. But what did happen at that time is the bubble, and I don't know how many of you were around when the bubble happened in '99, 2000. Suddenly, everyone thought that brick and mortar was going to die and e-commerce was going to become the way things were going to be. So within 6 weeks of starting TechSpan, we started on 1st January '99. We decided that, hey, let's forget our plans, let's just leave them, and let's focus on e-commerce. And that worked out really well for us, because in the month of June '99, we did over $1 million in revenue. We ended the calendar year '99 at some 15.4 million, and we were profitable the last 2 or 3 months of the year. We did 66 million, I think, if I remember the number right, or was it 70 million in the year 2000, which is 24, in the 12 to 13 to 24 months after we started. And we made 4 million in profit. We were fortunate. We were going to go public at some crazy price, but we were being discounted for being profitable. The thinking then was that you aren't investing enough in the future. And to my gut, that wasn't right. I mean, I guess I came from India. I thought profit was a good thing, and companies were supposed to make profit if they were going to be valuable. And so we didn't go public, thank God, because that's how we survived. And then, of course, the slowdown happened. And unfortunately, 2001, my father wasn't well, so I was spending a lot of time in India, and I wasn't really paying attention too much to what the company was doing and how it was doing. We were not losing money. We were, sort of cash neutral, so I wasn't too worried about it. But from 70 odd million, our sales crashed down to something like 25 million in that year, 2001. Unfortunately, my dad passed away in August, and I was able to go back and spend some time with the company. And I sort of realized that we were thinking every 15 days, every month, the bubble would come back, things would get back to normal. Just didn't happen. And at some stage, in our business, in IT services, you can't be standing still, because you're not really standing still. You're sort of falling down a slope. And the faster you go, the more difficult it is to control that momentum and stop. So we decided to do that. We had to do something. And we came up with a plan, which I describe a little bit. It was very interesting. We called it asset light. What we said was, let's just focus, and we always wanted to focus on one area, or one, because we were small. And we said, let's focus on the capital markets, the investment banking business in New York. And everyone had got laid off, even in Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, the big investment banks had laid off people. So we'd go to the bars in New York and talk to people and, find out who's doing what, and someone came from this group, that group, whatever. In the meanwhile, we were talking to customers, and let's say Goldman Sachs came to us and said they're looking for someone in their municipal bonds area. So, and we always used to say we are domain people and stuff. So we'd go and sort of remember that I met this guy at that bar he was from Morgan Stanley and he was from the Muni Bonds setup. So we go talk to him and say, would you come with us for this pre-sales call? You come as our domain expert. And if we get the business, I'll give you a job and you're part of the company. If we don't, we tried, you tried, that's the way life is, then life goes on. So that's why it was called asset light. And because they had nothing to lose, they used to come, a lot of them used to come along with us. And we got some business and we got our image as being domain people. The good news was when the economy came back, all these people got jobs because someone or the other recruited them. And they all remembered that we tried to help them. So they got back to us from wherever they were and said, hey, can I help you? I'm in this company now. We need some people in these areas. Would you be able to help us? That really helped. So that, and one more thing happened when we were in TechSpan. Again, I'll try and not be technical, but there's something in the investment banking areas called return. So what happens is when you balance your books at the end of the day, you realize you're, say, 500,000, 500,000 shares of IBM short. So Goldman Sachs will call Morgan Stanley or someone and say, can you give me 500,000 shares so I can balance my books? And so they get those shares. And then at some stage, Morgan Stanley will want them back. You want to be the most inefficient to be recalled, right? And so the way it's all manual, they have fax machines, they have voicemails, they don't pick up the voicemails for 2 days. They claim, oh, I didn't get your fax, all that stuff. So it's completely manual. Goldman wanted to automate it, but they didn't want to do it in New York because then everyone will know they were automated and they'll be recalled first. So we were doing it for them in Noida, and we would give it to them every morning, and they would then work the normal way that they would work with that. But it was automated by us for 4 years. Then the government in the US decided that they wanted to go T+1. By the way, business is T+2. You settle within 2 days. They wanted to go T+1 and then T+0. So you want to do instantaneous settlement, obviously over a period of time. And so the industry got into a real flux on how to do things, what to do, stuff like that. And the area that worried them the most was recall, because all of them had it manual. So at the Securities Industries Association, the SIA, the Goldman guys went in and introduced us and said, we've actually automated it, and these guys are the experts who did it for us. So we got positioned as experts in the Securities Industry Association, which really helped our image as Headstrong when we went in. Now, we were TechSpan in those days. What happened was, again, there was an investment bank called DRKW, right? European investment bank, and they had a CIO called Alnur Ramji, who then became CIO of British Telecom, and he's moved into a lot of big companies after that. But he wanted to try and get the people in India to understand the innards of the investment bank. So he actually, when we used to recruit from IITs at 4 lakhs annual salary, he was recruiting at 7 lakhs. But he wanted people whose JE rank was below 300. I mean, I'm just giving that as a number because he wanted the smartest people he could get. And that's what he did at that salary level. And he actually taught them the innards of the investment bank. And they were located in Bangalore. Now, DRKW got bought by Dresner. Dresner got bought by Allianz. And if you remember, during the slowdown in 2007, 2008, Allianz, in their wisdom, decided to give up their stuff in Asia and become Eurocentric. So they started closing their offices in Asia, and they were closing this center. It was called WebTech in India, in Bangalore. We found out through Avendus, and that was Avendus' first deal. They just started. They told us that they're closing it down. Sandeep Sahai, who was my COO, and we flew into Bangalore. We met these guys, and I still remember we had $1 million in our bank at that time. That's all we had. On a piece of paper, this was in September or October. And on a piece of paper, we figured that we weren't going to be revenue generating with these guys till March the next year. and in 6 months what it would cost us. And it looked like half our money, $500,000 is what it would cost us to carry these people till we started generating revenue. On a napkin, we both sat down, did the math, went back and did what I call a soft acquisition. We took over the lease, we bought all the equipment, and we gave all the people appointment letters from the day that they left, because they were getting a nice closing bonus or exit bonus from the company that was letting them go. And then suddenly I had domain expertise in India that even Accenture did not have. And so I was able to get domain jobs in India that they couldn't give anyone else. And that again made a real difference to the way we were looked at. The other thing that happened at TechSpan was that now Headstrong, it was the erstwhile James Martin and Company. And some of you may remember that HCL had a joint venture with James Martin and Company to address the Y2K business. And I was the chairman of that joint venture. Well, this was many years ago. I left HCL, and I don't know how, but when I was in Virginia at our office in Fairfax, Virginia, someone reached out to me, and I decided on my way to the airport to stop by in the James Martin office, which is now Headstrong. They changed their name, and they were looking at setting up a back office in India and see if I could tell them that I'll do it on a build, operate, transfer, whatever means, whatever structure they were thinking in. So we got talking, they liked what we were saying, but their thing was that, look, we need to take a 10% equity stake in TechSpan because that's the only way we feel comfortable. And so we said, by the way, we also then need to take a 10% equity stake in Headstrong. And so we started that discussion, but you've got to do valuation of the companies. And that took something like 12 months, 9 to 12 months, I forget the number. But we finally decided to do a full-scale merger. And that happened in October 2004, if I remember right. I remember I was in New York. It was Diwali the next day. And at 5 o'clock in the evening, I'm going to the airport to catch a flight back to California. And I get a call from the Headstrong general counsel saying that they've just got it cleared by the guys in Delaware, and that our first working day for the merged company would be the next day, which was Diwali, which, at least for most of us in India, is the most auspicious day in a way to start a company. And that worked out well for us. But that's the way we started Headstrong. Originally, I was the chairman. I was supposed to come back to India and actually get our delivery center in Noida, which was the TechSpan delivery center, and Headstrong had a delivery center in Manila. I was supposed to make sure that our libraries were the same. And so for a customer, whether I delivered from Manila or Noida, it would be completely transparent. What happened, unfortunately, or what happened was that the private equity group that had invested in Headstrong had gotten a CEO who was supposed to shut it down. And they felt that he was not the right person if they wanted to grow the company, which they wanted to do when they merged with us. So I got a call from them, I think 3 months after, in January, mid-January, saying that, look, you have to become the CEO, at least temporarily, till we find another CEO if you're not interested. And if you're interested, then you have to make a 2-year commitment. And I thought to myself, two different cultures, TechSpan and Headstrong. I was running it, or the one CEO was running it for 3 months. I run it for the next 3 months. Then a third person comes in and runs it. That's a definite way to make sure nothing's going to happen. That company is going to close down. So I made that 2-year commitment. I actually said I'll move to Virginia, where the headquarters was. I still remember I landed in Virginia and it was snowing in January. So the first thing I did when I got to office was call Welch, Carson, Anderson and Stowe, WCAS, who was the private equity group. And I told them I'll do this, but I'm not moving to Virginia. I'll still live in California. I'll spend my time in Virginia, which is what I did till 2011 for 7 years, till we sold the company to Genpact. What we did was quite exciting in Headstrong. I think we were many years ahead of our time. I think we thought that the industry would change a lot quicker than it changed. We actually were domain specific. We had much higher bill rates. Our kind of profile was 30% of our people were in the US, 70% were in India and Manila, but 70% of our revenue came from the US because our bill rates were high. And that's the way we built the company. I think customers still remember us. I still get calls from some senior people in these companies that talk about wanting similar kind of expertise which they are unable to get from their vendors today. In fact, when we sold, I remember, okay, again, some things that happened. When the slowdown happened, Morgan Stanley was our largest account. We had done 25 million with them the year before the slowdown happened. And of course, everyone was laying off, especially in the financial sector with the slowdown. We used to proudly say that the top 20 banks on Wall Street are our customers. Why do I need anyone else? Suddenly, there weren't 20 banks on Wall Street. Some got bought, some died, some, there weren't 20 big banks on Wall Street anymore. But two things happened. One was a lot of the people who got laid off went to mid-sized companies and their ambitions grew, but they didn't have the infrastructure from an IT and expertise point of view to grow. And so a lot of us got business from some of those mid-sized companies. And from, I think, 0%, they grew to 19% in 1 year and 41% of our revenue in the second year. The other thing was Morgan Stanley laid off 10% of the people. We had a lot of people there. So now we had domain experts who we could work with other people. And so we were able to open a lot of accounts like UBS and stuff where they needed that expertise, which we were finding difficult to get. The third thing that happened was that Morgan Stanley came to us and said, look, we are asking all our vendors to give us a 10% discount. And if you can't do it, then you're no longer a vendor with Morgan Stanley. So we looked at our competition in Morgan Stanley. Our major competition was Capgemini and TCS, and both were public companies that were giving quarterly results to the stock market. We were a privately held company. So we talked to our board and said what we'd like to do is go back and give a much more aggressive discount schedule to Morgan Stanley, but tell them to guarantee our revenue. So we went back to Morgan Stanley and said, look, why 10%? I'll give you 20% off because you're hurting. I understand you're hurt. I want to soften it for you. I'll give you 20% in the first year, 10% in the second year, but 0 in the third year, because that's when I might want to go public and I'd like my results to look good. So they talked to us and said, look, but there was a rider to this. I said, what I do want is a 3-year, $75 million order, because I just want my revenue from the last year protected for the 3 years that we give this discount. So they said, we can't get it to 0. We'll make it 5% in the third year, which was fine, because as long as they gave me that $75 million order, which is what I wanted. So they did agree to the order. And I still remember the person who gave me the order. He was the number 3 person in the company at that time. He asked me when he gave the order, he said, how much do you think you'll get in 3 years? And so obviously I said, how much do you think I'll get? And he said, I think you'll get 125 million, 125 million. I said, yeah, I also think it'll be in that range. What happened was quite amazing. The first year after we did that, our revenue jumped from 25 million to 66 million. And if we hadn't sold to Genpact, my target was to 96 was the budget, but I was going to try very hard to touch 100 million with that one customer in that 1 year in just domain expertise business with Morgan Stanley. We went to the market looking for money because we thought we could replicate this with other businesses. And our private equity guys were really, really good because they said that whatever price you raise money, we'll be willing to give it to you at a 10% higher price than that, which I thought was very fair. So we did a very limited thing. We just talked to 6 companies. We said, hey, this is what it is. Don't ask too many questions. Don't give me an agreement that has too many red lines in it. We won't look at it, and we want all cash. Tell me what you're willing to give. Our internal estimate was people would give us 425, I think, million for the business. Our offers came in at 550 million. And I would have still stuck on, but all the other founders with me were first-time entrepreneurs. And I just thought it'd be good for them to see that kind of wealth, because it then makes you free to think of what all you want to do, what you'd like to do, stuff like that. So we took that deal at 550 million in May of 2011. And, I didn't take a lock-in. I decided, and they really didn't have a place for me in Genpact. But the other senior folks were locked in for 2 years as part of the deal. I decided to go out and work with startups. I wanted to spend time in education and healthcare. And I thought we should be able to leverage technology in both those sectors to try and get the benefits of education and healthcare to the economically underprivileged. Education has been a bit of a challenge. We are still doing some work there, but it hasn't grown. Just the whole digitization and the digital content part of education hasn't grown as quickly as I thought it would in this country. It will grow at some stage, but it's not happening as quickly as I thought. But healthcare grew very quickly, and now with the COVID crisis, it's actually taken off quite a bit, especially telemedicine, triaging. What I'm trying to look at is, again, we looked at when one looked at healthcare with this group of ex HCL guys, the key was, how do I put this? The key was our patients, because the economy is going up at some whatever percentage is going up, the number of patients that are coming into the affordable healthcare area are going up from 12 to 18%. Depends on how well the economy is doing. But the doctors are only going up by 4%. And every doctor I know is grossly overworked today. So I thought, hey, if this is going to happen, these poor doctors are going to have no time to spend with patients. And obviously, patients will suffer because you won't get good enough diagnosis and, everything that gets connected to that. But why don't I look at where doctors are spending non-patient facing time and how do I reduce that by automation? And so that's what we're working on. What we've been able to do today is give doctors 30 to 50% more time to face patients. We've got an intelligence system, and as it learns through machine learning, I expect this to go up to 70%, and in some disciplines, medical disciplines, even to 90%. So doctors are going to have a lot of time, plus get electronic medical records, plus be able to monitor patients, especially chronic patients who come to them after every 6 weeks. Let's say you're a cardiac patient, you go to the doctor after every 6 weeks. Unless you have an emergency in those 6 weeks, he doesn't know what happened to you. But if I can monitor certain their blood pressure, temperature, whatever the variables he wants to monitor, he'll have that full chart when he sees you 6 weeks later. His diagnosis will be better, the medication will be better, he's able to, everything will be better. And you will feel better because you'll get better served by the doctor. So that's what I'm doing right now with companies that other people have started. I'm just helping them take it to the next step in terms of growth and managing that growth. Now, I've been talking a lot about myself and what I've been doing, but I'd love to answer questions. I don't know how much time we have. We've got about 15 minutes. I'm happy to take some more time if it's available, but I'd love to answer questions.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that was, thank you very much for sharing so openly with our audience today. And I found the journey that you spoke of extremely exhilarating. Founding HCL, creating a multi-million-dollar business, and then doing it all over again with TechSpan and Headstrong is a massive achievement. I think stuff truly dreams are made of. Uh, I think you've also mentioned a few things which stay with me. One of them, you said that one reason that you managed to achieve what you achieved in your journey was that you never thought anything was impossible. But I guess you also had the acumen to pivot or create opportunities at the right time. So the first question that I have for you, sir, is that most entrepreneurs or businessmen face this dilemma. They get too involved and invested in their idea and business. At times they miss the opportunities to pivot or don't know when to disassociate themselves from the idea if it's not working. So what's your point of view on that? How do you know when to pivot or when to move to something different or more promising opportunity?
Yeah, so it's a slightly long answer. Let me give you another anecdote that where I think one of the important things we did in HCL. When I went to the US in 80, so when we when we said we are going to sell our hardware, our computers in the US, we had got McKinsey to do a study, and we had made a multiprocessor system in India which ran Unix as if for the user it looked like it was single user Unix. So he didn't have to get trained, but the machine took advantage of multiple processors and could handle multiple more terminals. Now, the machines that were available in the US doing that were from MIPS and Pyramid. They were close to $1 million. Our system was in $100,000 range at that time. So we went very happily to the US based on this McKinsey study. We got government to give us $5 million, convert our rupees to dollars, which was very difficult in those days, as equity, and started HCL America, as it was called then. We got a big order, 50 million OEM order from a company called Fortune Systems. Now, what happened is Fortune got acquired by a company in Texas called MCI, I think. Forget the initials. But MCI insisted that they only wanted to go based on Intel chips. And our multiprocessor was based on the Motorola 68000. Actually, we used the 68020 and the 68030 at that time. So all of a sudden, this order we had was a piece of paper. Now, if I had been living in the US for a long time, I could have gone to court and got a lot of money from that company because I had an order, we'd already done some work and stuff. What also happened at the same time was one of our founders, Yogesh Vaidya, who was in the US, had to go for a multiple bypass. And bypasses weren't common then as they are today. And he did say in 10 days he'd be allowed to drive and all that, but we thought he was pushing himself. And so I was in between projects at that time. So I was sent to the US to quietly shut down the operation because we had taken a lot of mileage in India saying our machines are going abroad and all that stuff. So when I went to the US, first thing I found was to sell a computer in the US, the enabling technologies have to, so first you have to do UL rating and all that stuff. But I had to have databases like Unify or Informix. I had to port compilers like Microfocus, etc., etc. And you have to pay to get this done. Now, because we were multiprocessor based, none of them had the multiprocessor extensions on their software to port it on our machine. So the way we worked it out is that I won't pay you for the port, but I'll give you my engineers who will build the multiprocessor extensions on your software and port it on my machine. And the engineers, I'll give at my cost, so I don't have to pay you for the port. So when we decided we were going to shut down our hardware business, the first thing I did was I called all these companies and told them that, look, I don't need to do this anymore. So I'm pulling my engineers back, and I was trying to send them back to India as part of that shutdown. Now, these engineers came to me and they were very upset and said, we don't want to go back to HCL with our tail between our legs and, all that stuff. And to an extent, I also felt bad. I thought, here's me. I'm technically a shareholder in the company, and I'm quite happy to seemingly shut it down. And I have these people who work for me who have no real stake in the company, but who feel passionately that, look, we're going to look bad if we go back without doing what we came here to do. In the meanwhile, these companies called me up and said, look, I will pay for I need those extensions on my software. I will pay you for those engineers. And they were paying a pretty good price. TCS in those days was at the $25 an hour, $35 an hour. They were paying me $45 an hour or more. I said, we'll pay for this. Why don't you let them complete what they're doing? So I thought to myself, why not? I've got the engineers. I'm here. They're giving me a positive cash flow. Why should I not do this? And so I quietly said, okay, I told the engineers, go ahead and get this done. We had a lot of people from the US who worked with us on the hardware, and I told them I don't need them, and I let them go. But I kept my engineers who'd come from India, basically, who knew my multiprocessor technology. I didn't ask India for money, which they were surprised because they thought, to shut it down, I'll need some money from India. But because I didn't ask them for money, they also didn't ask me any questions because they didn't want They didn't want to know because they didn't know how I was managing it. In the meanwhile, you remember '91 we had that slowdown. Rakesh Goswami burnt himself. VP Singh was prime minister. There was a recession, and in India, unfortunately, office equipment and computers are the first thing that get hit in a recession. People stop buying them, and so HCL ran into a tight cash situation. I was making a lot of money there because I'd made $3 million of losses getting to that point. So whatever profits I was making, I was not paying any tax. I was adjusting it against my losses. So when I talked to them and I'd come to India, all this problem about cash flow because of the recession, I told them, yeah, I can send you $1 million. So they said, what the hell? But I said, I don't know how to send it to you. So I ended up buying the Hindustan Instruments or the Instruments Division plant in Gurgaon and set it up as my offshore center and sent them $1 million or $1.5 million, I forget the number at that time. And that's when I told them what we were doing. And I got a lot of flack for it because in HCL, we believed engineers were for R&D and that programmers from NIT were for programming. And that I was using engineers to do quote unquote what they said was programming, although it was R&D with these companies because I was working on their compilers and their databases. But that is how we got into the IT services business. So when you talk about how do you pivot, sometimes, how do I put it? You got to play your hand with the cards that are in your hand. You can't sit and say, I want a joker, and then only I'll be able to do something. What you've got is what you've got, and you've got to play your hand with it. And I think that's what you've got to do when you say pivot, is you can't keep waiting for something to happen. You've got to actually, you've got to look at where you are, what you're doing, and play with your cards in your hand, basically. And that's what is HCL Technologies.
Absolutely.
So, when you look at HCL Technologies today, that's how it started.
Yes, very, very well said, sir. You got to play your cards well, and you will be dealt with cards, and how you respond to it, it really changes the game for you. So the next question is from Shiv Kumar Swami. I think Shiv Kumar is a regular on our show. And to your point, you had mentioned two businesses which you've been focusing on and you feel would be emerging business, which is education, technology. So Shiv Kumar wants to know, are there any other businesses that you feel, at least from the current situation, could be game changer for future? And also that how do you really go about building or getting conviction from VCs to fund your ideas? And if you have a bright idea, what would be your advice to somebody on this?
Yeah, so let me answer the second part first. People don't fund ideas. Let me ask you the question. If you had the money, would you fund an idea? And if you wouldn't fund it, why do you expect a VC to fund it? So people like ideas, and ideas you can get 1 million ideas on a lot of things. People fund two things. They fund passion. You've got to want to change the world in some way. You've got to have a team, and you've got to address a large market. Because as you start a company and you have an idea that you want to go after something, when you start going after it, you may realize that that's not really what you thought it was. And so you've got to deviate from there. And you have to have a large market to deviate into. If you're only working in a niche and it doesn't work out for you, then you're stuck. And a lot of people hate funding you because they don't want to get stuck. And the other thing is you got to build a barrier to entry. You can't say, I got the idea first and my first mover advantage is going to drive me, or I'll do it more efficiently than someone else. Would you fund someone who says that to you, who you don't know? Just think about it. And I always say, put yourself in the other person's shoes and see what they would want to see. And more than that, talk of a team. And again, I always tell people, try and recruit people who are smarter than you. Now, it's not that they aren't there. They are there. You've got to find them. And when you recruit them, please listen to them. Don't recruit smart people and then tell them what to do all the time. Then they leave. They'll get out of there because they are smart. So listen to them. Actually, companies grow because of teams and because of smart people. at least initially. Once you grow, then processes and other things become important, but they're not important in the initial stage. In the initial stage, it is the people, right? And everyone does nearly everything. I mean, starting from which pencil to buy, which pads to buy. I mean, everything is a decision that comes up to you. And the first part of the question, what's going to change? I think with COVID and the way the quote unquote, what they call the new normal, everything is going to change. I mean, different industries are going to change differently. Some are going to grow, some are going to have to adapt a little bit. Look at education. I mean, it's going online, right? And some look at travel, look at transport, look at anything where people have to work together. I think they're going to have to change. I don't have the answers, but if you think about a better way for them to work, leverage technology in some form, it's going to happen. I mean, at Magic Software, we know we work, people have been working from their homes now for a couple of months. My productivity is actually up and people enjoy it. It's actually saving the environment. I don't have that many people on the road. I don't have to transport them. It's just a win-win for everyone. Sure, I need to get them into office sometime, and there's certain things where you need to get a group together. There's certain things where we don't have the answers today of if I want to do set up an innovation group, how efficient can I do innovation discussion or brainstorming on Zoom or on a WebEx or through video conferencing? I think we're still not comfortable doing that, right? We still need to be face to face, but we'll find a solution. I don't have the answer right now, but we're working on some alternatives and we will find a solution. Right, we've already found solutions on how to look at productivity, how to monitor people, what HR processes are going to happen if people work remote. A lot of that is going to happen. Now think of the other thing. Think of real estate. IBM is saying they're going to give up half their space. People are renegotiating rentals with their landlords. It's what is going to happen to that business, number one. Number two, look at what's going to happen to homes. If people are going to study from home and work from home, aren't homes going to need to be a little bigger, or people will want larger homes where you have your one room, which is an office? Just think of what it's going to do. Also, just think of education itself. We just think of it as going online, but in higher education, if it goes online, why would someone go to Lakshmi Bai College to do engineering? Because the IITs can take million students online, maybe 2 million. How does it matter how many students you have online if your system can manage it? So why would everyone not go to an IIT or to a Harvard or to an MIT or to an Oxford instead of going to a not as big brand name university? And just think of what it's going to do to the whole education system. So just think of what this COVID thing is going to do and how long it's going to take for people to come back to what you think is the new normal, and then look at what changes it's going to make to industries. I would think every industry is going to get impacted, some positively, some negatively, and some sort of have to adapt in some form. But it's going to impact everyone. There's no one who's not going to be impacted. Doctors have to learn how to understand technology quickly. They've been away from it. Publishers have to learn how to understand technology quickly. It's those are how should I put it? They are, at least the publishing industry was pretty much in the dark ages till very recently, right? Well, recently means a few years ago, and they still hadn't found an efficient way to monetize their digital content, right? And just think of the challenges you have. The US claims some some number like that, 25% of their kids have some learning handicap, whether it's hearing, visual, ADHD, something, autism. Now, how do I adapt my digital content so that it's usable by everyone? And in a school system, they don't differentiate them, right? And so look at some of those issues and what needs to be done. And in India, we don't look at too many of them because we're still trying to educate our non-handicapped people, and we're not doing a good job on that. But it's going to happen. And I talked to the Delhi government, and they are saying that 2021 to 2025, when they want to get 100% education for up to class 12, that's when they want to address it. Right now, their hands are full trying to address just the normal problems that they have. So it's things are happening. They're happening. They'll happen at a different rate in different countries and different geographies, but they are going to happen. So just look at your industry instead of trying to look at some other industry, and try and see what is going to change in your view. Keep your ear to the ground. I can't tell you what the new normal is going to be. All I can tell you is every week, every day, you get inputs that make you think it's going to be a little different or it's going to be something else. So, organization structures in large companies, they're going to have to change. I mean, gone are the days where a hierarchical structure is going to be the most efficient. I've got to work in teams. In fact, right now, I need a team to tell me what's going to happen on healthcare, what's going to happen with the virus, and their job to feed it in so that we can use it to get an impact. I can't be siloed anymore. I have to get people to work together. I have to work, it's completely different the way we're going to have to work as we go forward, especially in the IT services industry that I know a little bit about. Okay. Any more questions?
Thank you so much. We got lots of questions here. I think we've got another 10 minutes. So a quick call out to our audience. If you have any questions, more questions, keep coming in. We have time for a couple of more questions. I see a lot of them on my panels are interesting ones. I'm going to ask you this one from Sajjan. And her question is that to get to where you've reached in life, you had to make a lot of decisions. And that's one of the most difficult things most people are faced with. So what principles of framework did you follow to make decisions that kept you on course?
So two things, and I'll tell you, when I was a kid, my dad would take me, if he, let's say, took me to buy a 45 RPM record, I'd go through and get it down to 2, and then I'd take a decision to buy one of them. As soon as I left the shop, I would think, oh, I should have bought the other one. Why did I buy this? And so you would always have that thing about I took the wrong decision. So when you take a decision, just remember at that time, listen to everything, look at what it is. Normally it's your gut that tells you what's right. Go ahead and do it. But please stay open to admitting you could have taken the wrong decision. And the quicker you take the wrong decision and change, the better off you are. Right. So, Wayne Gretzky, I think, is the one who's one day, he was this great ice hockey player in the US. And he took 20 shots at goal and none of them went in. So this sports commentator asked him after the match that why did you take 20 shots at goal? And he gave a very, very interesting reply. He said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So, I would put it this way, taking the right decision is the best thing. Taking the wrong decision is the second best thing. Taking no decision is the worst thing. And, we all crib about bureaucracy in India and how it's got us into this problem and how it's causing problems for all of us. Well, the bureaucracy lives on taking no decisions, because then no one can hold anything against you and you get your regular time-based promotions, which is a great problem because it's got to be performance-based at some level. So, decisions, after I take a decision, I don't think about it. Obviously, I think about a decision before I take it. I don't think about it for days and days. You try and take a decision at the appropriate time, as quickly as possible if you can. And then I go ahead and implement it. And then if we find it's the wrong decision, I change very quickly. And I'm the first person to admit it to my team, I took the wrong decision. And this is what we should do. If you sit on your ego and say, oh, I can't admit I look bad, then you're in big trouble, because then you're living with the bad decision that you took. And you're the one to blame for that. So, decision making is not an easy thing. It doesn't come easily to everyone, but you've sort of got to get used to it. And you've got to remember that if you take more good decisions than bad decisions, you're doing okay, basically. And so just try and take good decisions. Try and, and again, just as a suggestion, areas where you're comfortable, you can take a higher risk decision. Areas where you're uncomfortable, you tend to take a lower risk decision. So if you come to me in an area that I know or I'm comfortable with, I've feel confident, yeah, at 60%, I take a decision, I live with it. But in some place I don't, you come to me about some textile, something that I don't know, I'll probably want to get to an 80% comfort level or some level like that before I take a decision, if I have to take a decision. Right. And the other decisions that you've got to take normally are regarding people. Business decisions are normally quite easy. You have a certain amount of data, whatever you have, you take it on that. People tend to be very difficult because you never get all the data. And if you listen to them, sometimes they give you half truths, sometimes they give you half the story, stuff like that. I have one simple rule when I do a people decision. I try to be fair. And I try to be fair and I explain to them why I think I'm being fair. And I find that even when I take a decision and people think I'm being fair, they are willing, more often than not, they're willing to accept a decision which may not be in their favor. If they feel you come from a point of fairness, at least I feel that, and that's how I take my decisions. The other decisions you've got to take in your life sometimes are, how do I put this? Are ethical decisions, morally ethical decisions, right? And I'm an engineer. I do a simple thing. I try to simplify my life. So I basically ask myself 3 questions. If the answer to them is yes, then I do it. And the first question is, am I doing the right thing by my conscience? That means that my conscience tells me I'm doing the right thing. Then I ask myself the next question, which is it okay for my family to know about this? And if the answer to that is yes, then I ask myself the third question, that is it okay to read about it in the newspapers tomorrow morning? And if the answer to that is yes, then I go ahead and do it. Because then what am I worried about? I'm happy the world can know about it, my family can know about it, and I think I'm doing the right thing. So it simplifies my life to a great extent, and not every, but 99.99% decisions in life are in the gray area. You'll never get a black or white. And if you wait to take a business decision in black or white, you're not taking a decision. Then it's somewhere, the decision's already been taken if you can see the black and white. It has to be gray if you're taking a decision, right? So that's how I do it. I don't let it get my blood pressure up. I don't think about it. Yes, if it's wrong, I think about the impact of the decision. And if it's not going the right way, then I call everyone together and say, hey, I don't know if this is working right. What do you guys think? And hey, we take the decision, we change the decision, or we say, no, we're not implementing it right, or whatever the answer. Right. That's the way I look at it, and that's the way I do it.
Thank you so much for that, sir. Okay, we've got time for this one last question, sir, with your permission.
Sure.
This one is from Parikshit, and Parikshit wants to know that every successful person to reach where they reach have to make a lot of sacrifices. So what sacrifices did you have to make in your life to reach the level that you managed to attain?
When we started HCL, I used to be on the road 25 days in a month. I still remember 2 things I'll mention. One is on my 10th wedding anniversary, my wife told me it's actually a 3rd wedding anniversary, because if I count the number of days you've been home, that's what it would be. And my children, I don't think have still forgiven me, because I do try and spend a little more time with my grandchildren. And they always tell me that, but you never did that with us. And I was never home. I didn't, fortunately, we lived with my parents, so I never felt that they didn't get covered, because my parents were there, my wife was there. And so I felt I could concentrate on what I was doing. And, this work-life balance, when you become an entrepreneur, is a difficult thing. You think that giving your family financial stability will help them understand it. It's not true. Yes, to an extent, yes, they need the financial stability, and that's important. But after a point, it becomes an obsession with you, because you want to do more and more. But they feel that, hey, we're comfortable financially. Why don't you now stop this and spend some time with us? And I think that's one of the most difficult things to do. I'm not going to even try and answer it, is this work-life balance when you become an entrepreneur. But yes, you have to, family is very important, but in a way, if you're passionate about what you're doing and you're really working with a number of people, you've got to focus on that. And that has to, I mean, I took a posting to Bombay for a year. I went to Calcutta for 6 months. As I said, for 7 years, I traveled to Virginia. I went to the US, basically. And my wife, one of the reasons, she comes from an army background, one reason for getting married was, I don't want to be 11 schools in 11 years, which is what she did. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for her that way. I wasn't, the person she married didn't turn out to stay in that job and stay stable in one location. He just moved all over the place. But, that's life. That's the way it is.
Right, sir. I think we need to get your wife next time on Master Speak to hear the other side also.
Yep. I'll try not to be around when she's there. But the reason I came back in India was because I had decided who I wanted to get married to, and my to-be father-in-law at that time obviously logically said he can't get her married to someone who doesn't have a confirmed job. So I thought, let me get a confirmed job, get married, and then decide what I wanted to do in life. And so that's one reason why I stayed back. Although I had a admission to Berkeley and Stanford, and I wanted, like my family, wanted to become a researcher, teacher, wanted to do my PhD and work at NASA. But life is completely different. Which path you take, as I said, you grab the opportunities you get. That's the way you want to look at it.
Yes, and it turned out absolutely fantastic for you, sir.
Yes, no regrets.
Thank you very much today for joining us, Mr. Malhotra. It was such a pleasure to have you with us. And thank you so much for sharing so openly with our audience your life journey. There's so many lessons in there for all of us to pick from. And I'm sure all our audience out there, sorry to, I must apologize to all the audience who posted the question we couldn't answer. With your permission, sir, if some of these questions we can share with you and we can go back and post it to our audience, I think that would be great.
Sure, just consolidate them, and if you can, into, if you give me 100 questions, it's going to take me time, but if you consolidate them in general areas, I'll try my best to put them out, email to you, and then you can circulate it out to them. Very happy to do that.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you very much for being with us, sir. Please stay safe.
Yeah, my pleasure, and thank you to the audience for being there, and thank you, Rakesh. My pleasure being with all of you. Take care, stay safe. Yeah, bye now.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's session. The next session on Master Speak is on 1st of July with Bindu Anand. Bindu is the co-founder of Dwarka Trust, and she's going to talk to us about her insights on market in rural India at 6:30 p.m. 1st July. Don't forget to join us. I would like to thank our community support partner for partnering with us on this platform, spreading our message. Thank you very much, AdGully, Paul Reiter, Netcore, and Resultix for being with us. Thank you very much to all our audience for joining us today. Hope you've enjoyed this session. There are lots of learning in there and many more that we've done in the past. Stay safe, be good, and stay healthy.